Welcome to an in-depth body language analysis and thorough breakdown of the interview with Dr. Phil and Donald Trump. I see this as a somewhat antagonistic affair. We know that Dr. Phil has been a fixture of popular media for God knows how long before I've been alive. They've both been guests on the Oprah Winfrey Show, so there's a tangential Kevin Bacon sort of connection there. That being said, of course, we do have decades separating any sort of interaction on the screen between the two, and they do have differing political ideals where I could see, good old 70-year-old Christian Dr. Phil. We could also see a guy who has been kind of playing game and patty cake with the establishment in Hollywood or whatever have you, which is to say, of course, that he does have a point of view that is somewhat modulated and really watered down as compared to what he otherwise would be in a different culture, which is to say, of course, that when he goes to CNN and says, well, you know what, I got Trump to say such and such as concessions to the Democrats, is to say that he's clearly having a bias that is not completely in line with Donald Trump's, which, of course, is self-preservation on his end. And so, of course, we're going to break that down using that basis alone.
But I don't endorse candidates, so I want to sit down with President Biden and Kennedy as well, because everybody needs to vote, and not just vote, but make informed votes.
So you see this, folks. We see that Dr. Phil is trying to play it towards the middle. Of course, do I think that in his heart of hearts, he'd probably vote for Trump? Yes. But just like many Americans, the silent majority is comprised of people that are not outwardly out the closet, so to speak, to use a tacky metaphor. But the truth is that euphemism really gets down to the bottom of this, which is to say that he's opening an invitation to somebody like Joe Biden, knowing full well that of course he's going to say no to an interview. Are you kidding me? An interview that lasts longer than 15 seconds with Joe Biden is almost guaranteed to have a blunder. We saw him in Normandy in the D-Day remembrance or whatever anniversary, soiling one's own pants. And so it's a really difficult thing to watch. Joe Biden would totally not agree to an interview. Robert Kennedy might, but again, like I did in my last video, I kind of proved that he's irrelevant in the race, to be honest.
It's an honor to be with you. Let me just say, it's great looking at that logo. I've seen that sucker a long time.
Yeah, you look well.
I feel good.
Do
I
you?
Feel good. No pressure.
Yeah.
It's nice to lead a life of no pressure whatsoever.
Yeah.
Corruption, surrounded by corrupt judges and corrupt politicians. Other than that, there's no pressure.
You and I talked the other night, and I work in trial sciences.
So already it's a friendly vibe, but again, most interviewers, if they're smart, are going to try to be congenial and cordial, even if they disagree with a person, and then kind of work it in. Work it in as in like get the Trojan horse of a bad questioning.
For a lot of my career, and so I have a particular interest in the dynamics of the trial setting.
It was interesting when you called the other day about doing an interview. A lot of people want to do interviews, and I don't just agree to them very easily. But I've always had great respect for you. I watch your show, some of the real good ones, and some of the less intellectual ones, and that's okay too. But it's always been you've always been very special, and I knew that you were, in some form, very much involved with trials. And I found it to be very interesting.
See, now they're itching each other's back. Okay, so first of all, Donald Trump is used to antagonism. Think of the interviews he's done in the past 8 years. 80% of them, if you just issue and kind of disregard the Fox News ones, the Newsmax interviews, the other ones, like almost all of them, are complete garbage shoots when it comes to him getting crapped on. That being said, he's not an Indian street. No, he's not to be crapped on. In fact, let's keep it a little objective, is what Dr. Phil's going for. Let's see if he keeps this up, though.
That you would take this up. It's a very important thing.
Well, I wanted to, and I know that there was some news coming out of Georgia today, there was some news coming out of Florida today, that they're stepping back from this. And
Very good news.
I called for the other day, and I don't know if you saw it, but on Merritt Street Media, where I now do my show, I called for President Biden to stop all of this now. And of course, a lot of people said, oh, he can't stop it, it's a state case. Well, okay, that's an explanation for stupid people, but for people that
Okay, and see how pleased Donald Trump is. So again, reciprocity thus far. Again, we don't know if this is a trap yet, whether or not Dr. Phil is softening up Donald Trump so that he gets his guard down with a nasty question. But thus far, they seem to be gallivanting together. Now, again, Donald Trump with a very strong smile there.
And how this works behind the scenes and all, I say the same thing. They need to stop this. They need to stop pursuing you. Since you started your campaign in 2015 to run for office, there have been so many attempts to get you off the board even before you started your campaign. Then once you were in office, 2 impeachment opportunities, they changed the rules and tried to make it high crimes and misdemeanors, and there were business conflicts, and in this case,
Never ends.
it seems to be.
It's literally like they're two friends at the bar, like, yeah, she never stops nagging. Jesus. Wow. Okay, like if they're about to pull out the butt ice at this point, it's really, really clear.
of a sudden, within a matter of months, I end up with 4 cases. Now, of course, it's from the White House and the Department of Justice.
Huge accusation from Donald Trump, okay? Because this is stuff that technically is not factually correct. Did these cases come from the White House itself? We know that Joe Biden cannot write a legal brief despite being a lawyer on his own recognizance. Of course he couldn't. And so for this to be from Joe Biden himself seems a little facetious. That being said, we get what he's coming at. So it's to say like, okay, maybe it was not Joe Biden, but it was the people that run the country. It was the people that are Democratic executive branch employees, these sort of types. Now, that being said, that's still kind of a reach, but we can kind of see how they all mutually benefit from each other. If some ridiculous anti-Trump person, Democrat, basically Alvin Bragg, goes and persecutes Donald Trump on a technicality at best, okay? So you can see the conspiracy actually not being so far-fetched when you rationalize it that way. My question is, if you're going to have an interviewer like Dr. Phil, is he going to be kind of amenable to Trump's narrative and kind of work around it like a therapist would in real life? Or would he, in fact, be a little more combative like a Caitlin Collins, kind of like snappy, like, oh my God, technically you're wrong.
They totally control the state case. In fact, I'm not allowed to even be talking about certain aspects of it because I have a gag order. Think of it. I'm the Republican nominee. I was the president, and I'm leading the current Democrat by a lot. And I have a gag order from a local judge that was appointed by the Democrat Party.
So he does not contest this at all. Again, so therapist mode, he's just letting it slide.
Person, and he's appointed, and he put a gag order in me.
While
Nobody's
you're
ever seen anything like it.
While you're campaigning.
While I'm campaigning, like you just mentioned a question that
Okay, you see that again, more friendly overtures from Dr. Phil for whatever reason. He's like, while you're campaigning, Trump doesn't acknowledge it. He keeps going. So then Dr. Phil goes even more. He's like, while you're campaigning. So again, it's more like complaining about each other's wives at home, basically. It's what it's coming down to.
Right.
Can you imagine? I'm the Republican nominee, and I'm not allowed to talk because a local judge from New York, appointed by Democrats, said I can't talk about it. It's so unfair. And then he gives a jury charge. Nobody's ever heard of a charge like this. He gave instructions to the jury. And by the way, the jury happened to be in a location that was almost no Republicans. You understand that?
Yeah, it's 87-13 in the last 2 elections, Republican. And I know you can't talk about it. I'm not under a gag order. I do know that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice took a pay cut and went down in stature to go to a state job and become one of the lead prosecutors in this case.
That's okay. I didn't even know that. Well, see, I'm supposed to be this Trump supporter. I have a flag of his, like literally right here. The point is, though, is that you have Dr. Phil over here just saying like facts that are pretty obscure. I didn't know that. I think the layperson doesn't know that. You interview 10 people at a grocery store. I bet 9 of them don't know this. The point being, of course, is that Dr. Phil's saying like, wow, I'm giving you another bone, a very niche one at that.
But yet they say, hey, Dr. Phil, why are you saying that President Biden needs to stop all of this? It's a state case. That's exactly why I'm saying it. Don't be naive.
Smug ass Trump. Look at his face, bro. He knows he's cooked. He's cooking. He's like, oh, yeah. Oh, he took my side. Oh, thank God.
Understand that there's a power play going on
It's
here.
controlled by the White House and the DOJ, 100%.
Gerard Baker wrote in Wall Street Journal today, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, what do we say to those people that are rejoicing over reducing law to the status of a weapon in the hands of the dominant political power? Because that's what's happening right now. It's become a weapon, and that's not what it's intended for. That's not what we need to be doing. I mean, let's let the people decide these, right?
That's right. That was a very good statement in the Wall Street Journal. I read that this morning. And it's so true. I mean, it's so accurate. They've weaponized to a level.
We're about a third of the way through the interview, and yet nothing to the contrary of what Donald has said coming from Dr. Phil.
But I have no idea who she is. And they said I did things. These people are corrupt and in some cases incompetent. But it's such an honor to have somebody like you see it and see it so clearly. And I knew that. I mean, I remember.
Jesus. Oh, wait. Okay. Now that's concerning. That's concerning. So again, Donald Trump, who has been passively, he's known for watching TV all the time. So he probably sees Dr. Phil occasionally, like I have. And so he's like, oh, wow, this guy that I've been watching for a long time actually agrees with me, despite being a part of the mainstream media. That's actually really heartwarming. Just like when the Wall Street Journal made an anti-Biden piece, going through puberty, I'm 21, Jesus. Look, they made a big 45 reasons why Joe Biden should not be fit for president, whatever. And so you're seeing some fixtures of the popular media that was against Donald actually kind of flip sides tacitly and at least kind of break away with Biden, which is obviously the sensible thing for them to do. That being said, of course, Donald Trump is saying like, oh, damn, okay. It's kind of like, well, I was a loser in high school, but now they all want a job from me. I mean, so that's the hypothetical there. Now, when Dr. Phil gets this flattering statement from Donald Trump, notice his facial reaction.
To have somebody like you see it and see it so clearly. And I knew that,
So again, if the former president were to say like, well, I'm honored about something about me, I'd be like, wow, nice. But Dr. Phil's like, because he's being glazed directly and he knows that he's about to get whipped by either his wife or a combo of his wife and CNN. So look.
Remember that years ago you were helping Oprah out, and she was sued, and it was having a big impact on her.
Mad cow.
And I thought it was great. And you know, Oprah used to really like me. She was here many times.
Yeah.
She loved my key lime pie. We have key lime pie, and she loved a lot of things about Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
And Roger King, as you know,
Yeah, we were here for the funeral for Roger
correct,
King.
long time ago. It's the only
Okay, so you can see how they have this like acquaintanceship, and it's poignant to Trump. And also look at the amount of detail he has about Oprah Winfrey, somebody who has a ton of clout, who I know almost nothing about aside from maybe an Ozempic claim about her weight loss line. But that being said, of course, we do have an idea of like how popular she is. And to be honest, Donald Trump is somebody who's very vain insofar as he's like, okay, well, Oprah used to be my friend. She was so famous. What happened? And so now he's even remarking about a key lime pie. Now, again, I'm not a divorcee single white woman where I'd be like, oh, I remember when he used to eat my pie. But Donald Trump remembers that despite being a different demographic entirely, because his mind state is a little bit different, heightened in one way and kind of crazy in another. But that being said, of course, he is awfully, really just right now serving up what people would say CUNT, because he's just over here reminiscing on the fact that somebody like Dr. Phil's former boss, Oprah Winfrey, used to like him and now doesn't. And so now he's calling her two-faced, despite, again, Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Phil being on a good basis with each other. So he's making it awkward on Phil. Let's see how he deals with it.
funeral we've ever had at Mar-a-Lago. I said, maybe we can do a new business here. We'll operate as a funeral parlor. But it was one of the most beautiful funerals in the ballroom behind us. And he was a great guy. And Oprah's terrific. But once I announced I was running, and I said, we have to have strong borders, we have to have this, we have to have that, we've sort of lost contact, as the expression goes. But I remember when you
Okay, so Phil literally did not address a single thing Trump said in that case. So a good 2 minutes of rambling. And again, no acknowledgement from Phil, which is to say, Phil's like, okay, so in a way, for whatever reason, I don't know what Dr. Phil was expecting in the interview, but he started, sucking up to Trump, and then Trump's like, okay, and then Phil's like, okay, wait, nah. It's like, whoa. He's a tease.
very much involved in helping Oprah. And that's really the first thing I thought when you called about this horrible witch hunt. That, in all fairness, they've had going against me for years.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's been time and time again. And that was another black letter law that you just don't do. The judge tells you, okay, you can testify, but I'm going to allow them to ask you about this person that you now owe $91 million. I'm going to allow them to ask you about this other case. I'm going to allow them to ask you about 10 contempt citations that I've given you. I'm going to allow them to ask about all that stuff. What does any of that have to do with the matters at hand? And the answer is zero. That gets into the jury box if you take the witness stand. Again, that is black letter law. You can't let in unrelated things that have more prejudicial impact than probative nature. That just doesn't happen, but it happened 1, 2, 3 things right in a row, and that gets into the jury box.
If you testify, they'll be able to ask you about all these different things. And by the way, if you say one thing if you say it was a beautiful day, as I remembered, and it was raining out, we're going to indict you for perjury.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I have a lot of lawyers that are friends and this and that. I had probably 25 guys over the course of a couple of months say, whatever you do, don't testify, because you'll say something that's a little bit off, and you will be indicted for lying, for perjury. These are evil people. These are sick, evil people.
Oh, I would have thrown myself in front of your car to keep you from testifying.
No, I wanted to so badly. And by the way,
Wait, what?
Myself in front of your car to keep you from testifying.
No,
I would have thrown myself in front of your car to keep you from testifying. So again, the simping is crazy, but you see how this guy, Dr. Phil, is such a tease. On one hand, he's supportive in one angle, and then when Trump mentions Oprah Winfrey, he shuts the hell up because I guess that's what butters his bread. And then now he's like, oh, I would have totally died. I would have been like one of those, one of these terrorists. I would completely end it all just for you to not testify.
I wanted to so badly. And by the way, I would have loved to have testified about those things because it was so corrupt and so horrible. But he wouldn't have allowed me to answer the questions properly. No. And so I would have loved to have testified. I wanted to. I'm telling you, they had to hold me back. But every lawyer that came, they'd always start to say, by the way, I'm afraid you just don't testify. And they saw what he was doing. They can ask you about anything. They can do nothing to do with his case. All of these outside things. And it was really an unfair trial. There's a very brilliant judge in Florida that's holding the government. It looks like, she's looking into what happened. Because, they raided Mar-a-Lago. Right. And they took stuff out by the satchel. They took bags and bags of stuff. And I said, what are they taking? Are they saying what they're taking? Because they can add things. They can add the nuclear codes in there. They say, hey, he had the nuclear codes.
Again, so another sign of oh, I agree, by Dr. Phil.
He's incompetent. Basically, they're saying he can't stand trial due to incompetence, but he can run for president. What's going on? Yeah. What are we missing here?
Yeah, it makes everybody uncomfortable about that state of affairs. And what I was concerned about with everything that happened in this.
Okay, so again, Donald Trump kind of insinuates hey, let's tag team Biden right now, no homo. And then Dr. Phil is like, oh no, let me sidestep it. Let's play the more middle side about how the jury was rigged or whatever have you. which kind of shows you where Dr. Phil is trying to go here, where it's middle ground, middle ground, middle ground, middle ground, middle ground. And it just so happens that the left has gone so crazy that the middle ground just so happens to partially side with Donald Trump. And we see the GOAT, Alan Dershowitz, actually be defending Trump on the basis of this jury and the whole trial in and of itself, the 34 counts of these felonies, being BS. And so you can kind of see how some parts of the establishment are really swapping over to not even the other side, but just to call out the Democrats like, God, what the fuck, chill out. And so the worst excesses of these Democratic motivated events are becoming scrutinized by people like Phil, but he won't ever dare criticize Biden's double standard when it comes to the legal system, which is plain as day for anybody to see, as Donald Trump had, really pronunciated in the past couple minutes, where he says, in fact, you know what? Joe Biden is declared as not fit to stand trial, yet on the same basis is also being the president with nuclear codes. How does that even make sense? It doesn't really. And so, again, Dr. Phil sidesteps that. And, at the beginning of this video, I did show you the clip where Dr. Phil says that he would like to interview RFK and Joe Biden. Well, isn't that kind of convenient? Then he won't rag on Joe Biden succinctly and directly, maybe in the hopes of getting an interview, which if I were the producer for the Dr. Phil show, I'd say, brother, he is 82 years old. He's not going to do a long form interview with you. And you'd be lucky if you got a 30-second shout out, because Joe Biden is mentally not there, bud. It's crazy. It's insane.
New York trial is one of the big myths is that the burden of proof lies with the prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
That is the law. But I can tell you, after years and years and years of trial, the truth is that the jury sits there and says, I'm looking at all this, and if we're not down here for the reason they say we're down here, somebody needs to give me an alternative explanation of why we are down here. So if we're not down here because of what the prosecutors are telling us, then what's the alternative story? What's the alternative explanation? And when you get muzzled in the way that this judge muzzled this case, they're sitting there saying, what's the rest of the story?
That's a great point.
You're not allowed to testify because you're in jeopardy if you do. They let all of this other stuff in that should never get into the jury box. And so, the scales get tipped. And it gets very, very difficult to get even one juror because there's not an alternative story that if you could tell without being in peril, if you can tell without being intimidated, it would be a very different situation. The burden legally is on the prosecution. But logically,
You're
with the
guilty
jury,
until proven innocent.
that's exactly the truth.
I can tell you, that's the truth with me.
That's how it
what
plays
happened.
out. And I did a focus group about this when I did a show on this on Merritt Street. And I had 250 people in, did a focus group, and I said, and overwhelmingly the people were in your favor. But I found those that had questions, and I said, what is your question? They said, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
I didn't hear
I
the other part of it.
I'm sitting here, and you've asked me indirectly a couple of questions. They're so simple to answer. I'd love to.
So you see how Dr. Phil is kind of trying to relate it back to his show. So again, he has a show that's a step above Jerry Springer, where it's a lot of legal drama, domestic violence, whatever have you. And so now he's relating it to his own experience, which is interesting. So it's kind of like Dr. Phil is interviewing Trump in a self-serving manner to promote his new Merritt Street sideshow or whatever it is. And so now he's doing this and saying like, well, I have experience with trials, so let's talk about the trial. Let's not crap on Biden because I want to interview Biden. Of course, about what exactly? In fact, if Dr. Phil were really good, he'd actually interview Hunter Biden and be like, hey, why are you on crack, bro? That'd be pretty funny.
And yet if I do, this guy's he's willing to throw you in jail, okay? This is an appointed judge, acting. He's an acting judge, appointed. And he's willing to throw you, and he's so conflicted. It's so sad. But you do things for your country. And I view it, I think if my country weren't involved, because people say, the two questions, I get these questions from very tough guys like you, the biggest guys on Wall Street, the people that you read about, but they're tough men and women. But I have the question asked often is number one question I get, how do you stand it? How do you do it? How do you get up in the morning and put your clothing on and go to work? I do get that because people don't envy it. And the other one I get is, will they do it again? Meaning, will they cheat? Will they do it again? Will it happen again?
Well, I have a different question than that how question.
Yikes. So again, he gives a good question, I assume, to Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil just sidesteps that again.
Question is why. I understand how. I know you got a thick skin. You're not one of those people that's afflicted with the need to be loved by strangers. I get that.
I think that's true.
My question is not how do you do it. My question is why do you do it? Why do you, let's face it, I mean, you're a billionaire, you got a great family, you're a very dedicated father. People may not see this in you a lot because you keep that kind of private, but my question to you is why do you subject yourself to this? If you want to see more of our...
No way, no. Oh, now you have to download the Merit app? Okay, so you can kind of see how self-serving this is, but anyway, with that cut off to say, like, you know what? If you download my exclusive app that you've never heard of, the Merit app or whatever it is, you will in fact find the full interview. Well, guess what? To be honest, folks, it seems like we can kind of understand what the bias was with Dr. Phil. It was not pleasing the establishment. It was not sucking off Donald Trump. It was just trying to get a cheap, big name for a sideshow app. And so That's the bottom line. That's the takeaway. That being said, it's somewhat surreal to see the two on screen together, and you got that. Now, my analysis was going to be body language, but there wasn't enough to feed off of. And by the way, I did hear that Donald Trump has the full hour interview. Problem is that obviously I think you got the point already with this, and you can just watch that on your own time. But also, the for whatever reason, the bit rate is like 480p, whereas with Dr. Phil, he at least had 1080 for the 20 minutes he gave us. And so that concludes my 20 minutes. Comment down below what you thought about it. What do you think of the format overall? Because this is a little bit of a departure from the election map predictions, but this is also in my wheelhouse, and so we love to see it. At least I do. And so like the video if you did like it, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Adios.